Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. To subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com.
Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. I'm Tony Pontoro, along with Ray Warren. Thank you all for joining us. Some of you are regulars, some of you may be new, and so welcome. We got an interesting show today. Before we start, we have to explain. Ray Warren, we learned, has a very bad golf swing. So, Ray, you're sort of in a back pain and on painkillers, so maybe they're going to make you smarter. We'll see, but sort of explain yourself.
So I will tell you this: I have a terrible golf swing, which I just thought was a terrible golf swing. But you only do lateral on the top, and I've been using too much lumbar, so my back is not in good shape. It is pain. It's every combination of things. I was on a stretching machine this morning, all sorts of fun stuff. So yeah, I was really excited to get off a table and come here, sit in a chair and talk to you. So it's a lot more fun than what I'm going through. So,
well, I know our guest host will enjoy it as well. It's interesting. I was looking at LinkedIn, and I won't spoil it. I was seeing a post from our guest, and but as I was going through that, there was a great Sean Connery, which goes probably 20 years ago, but he was talking about the game of golf. He was, I guess, very obsessed with golf and how it's very much an element of life. And he said, it's the easiest game to cheat on, but the only one it hurts is you who cheats, and you can never not know you didn't cheat. So I thought it was an interesting comment, as well as some other things for those who.
I love I love the game of golf. It is so pure. It gives you exactly what you give it. And I do believe the golf gods give you back you hit a sprinkler head and the ball bounces up, but then sometimes it bounces right. And so I do love the game. The game probably loves me, but it's just waiting for me to figure out how to, and I'm playing a lot more golf. So it's like, we'll figure it all out.
Well, your playing hurt, so we appreciate that.
Gotta play hurt. Gotta play hurt. Show must go on. Break a leg. All that stuff.
So it's sort of interesting. We always do a little few-minute talk about what's going on out there, and we're both products of 3 television networks, and you worked at Comcast for many, many years, and so they've sort of announced they're going to look at maybe spinning out their cable networks as its own entity. Obviously, streaming is becoming the new distribution form for consumers, and obviously getting everyone's attention. So maybe this new company is a new public company, unburdens itself from some of the other things at Comcast. Not that they're heavy burdens, but obviously they saw something here. But what's going on? Where are the consumers taking us here?
So I think, it's fascinating. I mean, it was a big news yesterday on the earnings call when they kind of made it official that they're looking hard at it. And there's been talk about Brian Roberts wanting to buy Discovery Cable and add it to Comcast, et cetera. This to me is something we used to talk about when I was on the agency side, as you spent some time. This is changing a flat tire while the car is doing 60 miles an hour. And it's exactly what it is. Nobody knows what the answer is. The legacy companies have a real built-in burden of overhead. Streamers did what's it called? Zero budget level planning. Start with zero. Like if you had a new company today, what would you do? So Netflix did that. Amazon, it's a side business. Apple, it's a side business. But it's not for Warner Brothers, Discovery, or NBC, or Disney. So there's this traffic that's going on. And it's just, everybody's got to figure out their own deal on how to go forward.
Well, and, choices, the consumer always wins, I always feel. The consumer sort of takes us to where any business has to go. That said, innovation and what's going on with technology is taking us there. I can remember I watched the fourth quarter of the Amazon Prime Thursday night football game last night. I want to see how Rodgers and the Jets were going to fare. And obviously it was actually a fun quarter. But I can remember just a few months ago, I think this may be the second year, so I should have done a little homework before that. But I remember watching a NFL football game on Amazon Prime and feeling it was very almost weird, sort of different. I had to go, get on my app and figure it out. Now it's totally seamless. It's like, oh, Amazon Prime NFL game, boom, I'm there. And it's just like, and so if you're under 30 years old, it's like, yeah, the game's on Prime, boom, I'm there. So it's sort of amazing. I mean, technology is taking us into the great frontier, but the consumers are following.
And the NFL is the best example. Sports, we talk about continuing to be pleased with the fact that we had a lot of sports experience in our careers, and it is the place to be. So I think that Netflix is coming on with 2 games on Christmas Day. That will be very interesting. I think CBS is going to produce the games. So it's all over. It's all over the place. Not all over, but it's just all over the place. And reducing costs which is what the legacy networks are so stuck with. These, $10 million news anchors who I think we talked about that. They're not all coming back. And it's a total redo. It's literally changing a tire at 60 miles an hour. It's almost like you got to go to zero budget planning because you've got to get out of these sunk costs. And one of the things you do is you spin off all the cable assets. Right now you're looking at the themes parks, studios, and a network. That's a pretty sweet business, right? Local news forever, as long as there's weather and sports and other kinds of news. Unfortunately, local is usually, if it bleeds, it reads. But they cover more national and global stuff. So the packages are very interesting. I don't exactly understand how the cable division works spun out, frankly, into a separate company, because we know that that's a very different. It's going down, sliding down. On the other hand, because NBC has commitments on the Golf Channel and USA and all that, they can really focus more on streaming by doing that too. Put more on Peacock.
Well, and I know our guest is going to make us a lot smarter on this, but similarly, I mean, I'm not a shareholder. I'm sure you're still a shareholder of Comcast, but as in my casual observation, that stock price hasn't gone very far in the last 4 or 5 years, or has it before?
No.
So,
it's been flat. It's around $40 for the last 4 or 5 years.
And it reminds me a little bit of AB. So Comcast is sitting there with cable subscribers that are going down, putting a drain on the overall company, right? Because that's got to be tough on the revenue split. And Anheuser-Busch was flat for 5 years before we got bought because we were already saturated domestically, but we didn't grow the international business. So
Right.
as Wall Street wanted us to. So I think this is a way to address Wall Street, which is you're not really growing where we want you to grow. So refocus it or spin it out. So we're not in the room, but I think that's a good segue. I'm really excited about this guest. Both and I are friends of her. I know Julie Sousa is our guest. Julie, for about 7 years now, and she's now at AWS, heading up all their global media, sports, and entertainment, and games, and that whole data world of the cloud. So she's going to make us a lot smarter on this. As I watched the game last night, with commercials, you could hit a button that says if you hit OK, Amazon will send you an email, and I'll be curious to see, how many people take advantage of that. So with that, I think we're both excited to have Julie Sousa as our guest host. Julie Sousa, welcome. How are you?
Good. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Ray, for having me.
This is a real treat for us.
Absolutely. Great to have you.
So tell us a little bit about Julie Sousa.
Wow. So tell you what I do. I lead global sports strategy for Amazon Web Services, which is the technical side of Amazon. Obviously, you guys were talking a little bit earlier about the Prime Video and Amazon side of the house. There is some, ways that we work together in terms of the analytics in sport, like you referenced, Tony, but really focused on how do we drive innovation in sport in a way that's actually creating real business value, right? Tech for tech's sake is not that interesting to me. How do we do things that improve the fan experience, drive operational efficiency, create new revenue streams? So it's sort of where does business meet tech, and how do we move the industry forward?
Are you finding that who's your customer? Obviously, the consumer's your customer. The advertiser community, I guess, is your customer as well. Or
Really, we work a lot directly with like leagues and teams, Tony. So we're working with the NFL, like I can, and in a lot of different ways, right? So NFL, you referenced before, next gen stats, right? When you tune in, and even if you saw in the game last night, it was an exciting fourth quarter. I agree with you.
Right.
You saw in a couple instances a little red orb underneath some players. That was all data-driven augmentation, basically saying, hey, we think that these defensive players are likely to blitz Aaron Rodgers right now, so pay attention, right? So that's a lot of that next-gen stat, analytic, tracking data-based stuff. So that's one use case. We also work with them on player health and safety and their digital athlete product, and we can talk about that a little bit more. Fan analytics. How do you get NFL had 90 billion rows of fan data, right? But only had real insight into about 12 million fans because it was all disparate, 100 different sources. Nothing was unified. So working with them on creating a unified view of the fan, that 12 million visibility went to 70 million, right? And then it's like, all right, how do we use that for advertising, marketing, and product development and all of that? And then there's also the media workloads that we work with them on, right? So how do you, preserve your archive? How do you have that in the cloud so that you can monetize it? How can you explore things like live cloud production, which has a lot of great benefits too? So lots of times it's teams and leagues. We work with their broadcasters. We work with other tech providers in the space, but it's a pretty big ecosystem.
Well, Ray, let me let you jump in here.
Yeah, that's pretty juicy stuff. But I'm going to go back and play therapist for a second. When Tony asked, tell us a little bit about Julie Souza. We got exactly what you're doing now. We do love to kind of talk about the journey, where you started. How did you get to your first job? Would you take it this time around? Just that kind of other juicy stuff.
I can do that. I didn't want to bore you with it though.
It's not boring. No, this is this. No, all good.
I went to I'm not going to really start back here, but I went to the University of Michigan undergrad. And I say that because if you're not a sports fan, when you walk in, you are coming out. And if you aren't coming out, then you did it wrong. But I think, but I did grow up a sports fan. I grew up in Detroit and then the Detroit suburbs. So I grew up a fan of sports. And, ultimately went to business school and really sort of figured out what I like to do, the functional thing I like to do, which is strategy and business development. And how do we, move the ball down the field, so to speak. And so then it really became that point of how do I take this functional thing that I love to do and marry it with an industry that I'm passionate about. And I was lucky enough to get hired way back in the day when college sports television was a thing. It was a startup.
Ray can
Right?
relate to that.
So I worked there. Brian Beadall hired me.
Brian Beadall, yeah. And
funny story.
And Aqua, right? Chris?
And Bevy, exactly. But the funny thing is, I was in Brian's office interviewing, and this is back in the day with, I don't know what kind of ridiculous cell phone it was, but you had like ringtone. My ringtone was the University of Michigan fight song. I, of course, turned my phone off before I went into the interview. However, I must have kicked it or something, and it went off while I was talking to Brian, who is an Ohio State fan. So I thought for sure
Perfect.
I was not going to get the job.
Just what you want to do. Excellent.
Mortifying.
That's great.
Brian hired me anyway, and that's where it started. So I was at College Sports Television, which then became obviously bought by CBS Sports. I was there for a number of years and went to Sports Illustrated from there. And then was recruited over to ESPN, where I ran BD over there. And
So
then
these are all business development
business
positions.
development and strategy. So I did BD and strategy for ESPN. And then I met a company. It was interesting. There was this guy, a real like analytics leader in the sports space, Ben Alamar, and he worked in the stats and information group at ESPN. And he walked in my office one day and sort of like slammed on my desk. He's like, "We have to buy Second Spectrum." And I'm like, "I don't even know. Slow your roll, Ben. I don't know who
What's the
that is."
spectrum?
Right. But he started explaining the analytics in sports and all of this data capture and stuff. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And I went to go meet with and just understand them a little bit better. And they were doing all the data capture for the NBA, right? And then using that data to create like real insights, like, hey, it's X's and Y's that we're collecting on the court, but that combination of X's and Y's in relation to the other X's and Y's on the court, that's a horns offense. That's a double team. That's an ISO. That's a pick and roll, right? And I'm like, wow, like this is going to change things, right? I think it's going to fundamentally
Yes.
change things and at least open up so much more opportunity right now that because we have this information, we're somewhat only limited by what we can ask of it. So I went to go join them and ran BD and strategy for them before coming to AWS 4 years ago. So that's the journey.
You were cool when it wasn't cool to be cool, doing data analytics in sports. Good Lord, we just still want to sell billboards, 30-second spots, beer, and tickets.
It's funny how it all like merges together though, and
Yeah.
how it can all have an overlap. So that's
What
my
what
journey.
made business development like strategy,
Mm.
like versus sales and
Yeah.
making calls and like was there more of an engineering brain that you came out of Michigan with, and
I was
which
a
made the yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I was a pre-med English major, so that's very helpful. I do open heart surgery on the weekends, like not at all. Not at all.
You do chiropractic?
That would help, right? I'll be right over. Yeah, I was always good at like sort of math and science stuff, but I loved
Mhm.
but I also had a passion for literature and things like that. So I had a big like liberal arts education, I guess I would say. Went to business school, and that I think that for me was a little bit more defining because it was how do we take business problems and understand the underpinnings of business too. And I still apply that. People, oh, this is great new tech, and I'm like, is it though? Like, what's the business model, right? What is it? Because how do you decipher between a shiny, bright object gimmick versus something that has staying power and is going to provide real business value? So for me, it was
Yeah.
always like the business construct and how do we
Right.
grow the business or do things in a more efficient way. And so I think, I work in tech, obviously, but I come at it very much with a business strategy mindset.
It's a great combination.
Yeah. One of the reasons, and thank you, Julie, for that, is when Ray and I first talked about the podcast, a lot of our motivation was to help younger people, particularly those that were at the time coming out of COVID, working from home, who was helping develop these young people, who was giving them their 2 cents, whether they asked for it or not. And so, taking the extreme, it's like, a career is something you get into and sort of move around and feel, and all of a sudden you get there, and then you can look back and say, okay, here's how I got there. It's not as simple as let me hit the GPS and how to get from New York City to Hilton Head, and that's the ride. So I think it helps our listeners and viewers understand that you got to get into the space, follow your passion, and then let it sort of develop and mature from there.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. And, I tell people, mine has not been terribly linear. I don't think this is not the career I expected for myself. I'm very much grateful for it though. And I love it. But like you, I talk to a lot of, younger, professionals in their career too. And I said, look, there's two big buckets. There's the functional role you play and the industry in which you play it. And I used to equally weight those, right? I don't anymore. I think the functional thing is more important, right? Because you have to love what you do. You have to be good at what you do, regardless.
Yep.
Sports, I'm not doing my job on the sidelines, right? I'm not. I have to love thinking about, strategic problems and how do we drive revenue and how is this technology going to, or whatever solution it is, drive something that is going to alleviate pain points or bring new customers into the ecosystem or something. So I think, whether it's sales or finance or operations or production or anything, like I always encourage younger professionals to find the thing that they enjoy doing, the what, right? And then figure out the where.
That's a total, yeah, Tony and I have had other guests where we have talked about the difference, like from going to just get a job, make money, climb the corporate ladder, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know when it started, but there's clearly an age gap between you and me and Tony. And
No, there isn't.
there's a transition that's going on where, where just people are more focused on what do I want to do. So that brings me to another question. What was your first job out of college? And
I worked for Accenture, which was actually called Anderson Consulting at the time. So I worked in consulting. It was systems consulting, right? So, but I'll tell you, I remember graduating Michigan, and again, pre-med English major. And my friend in the engineering school, he had also gotten an offer from Accenture. And so we're pretty excited. And I remember calling him one day and saying, you're super excited. But what is it? What are we doing? What's consulting? I didn't even really know. Right. And he was funny. He was like, I don't know. We're smart. We'll figure it out. I'm like, okay. So yeah, I went into systems consulting, which again was not what my, education was necessarily for. But I liked it. I liked the, and then from there I went to PeopleSoft, which is a software company that subsequently was bought by Oracle. But I liked that. I liked the, they did teach us how to code. It's the only time I've really coded, really, is that 6-week period at Accenture. But it did help me think about, logic, right? And so, coding is logic. There's math. It makes sense, right? Yeah. So it did have a really good, it helped me think about problems in pretty analytical ways. And it also professionalized me. I think, I came out of college thinking I knew how to be a professional. I had no idea how to be a professional, right? Business communication. How do you show up in front of a client? How do you, all of that soft skill stuff, I think was super important. So very grateful for that experience.
Yeah, that's a great launching pad.
Julie, on that note, what have you seen from, say, 20 years ago in the sense of culture and as the generational shifts have changed, even just in the office environment, but the attitude of younger people as how they approach their jobs? Is there a big shift, or are the fundamentals basically the same? Or how have you had to adapt, from maybe how you thought about business out of college and obviously as you develop through the different jobs to where you are today?
Yeah, I think in some ways, and of course this is a stereotype, right? But I think in some ways the newer generation understands life a little bit better, and that it's, work to live, not live to work sort of thing. I think we all come from the thought where it was, you were climbing that ladder and you were working hard, and that was part of how you defined yourself in some ways, right? As weird as that might be to admit. I do have a lot of, my identity in the fact that I work and have a career and things like that. Now, and so I think there are people there's more to life, right? How does this fit into the puzzle of my life versus being the central piece of the puzzle? And I think that's healthy, right? I think that's healthy in a lot of ways. But it just means that you're appealing to them in a different way, right? It's not just that, hey, promotion and carrot, carrot, carrot. It's there's a bigger picture here. And truthfully, I've tried to, and we were talking about this before, how, I'm involved in my community and things like that. I've tried to sort of make sure that I'm a little, more evenly sized puzzle pieces if I could. But yeah. I think that's the bigger difference. It's not just the societal definition.
So well said. So well said.
Part 2 of this podcast will be available next week. For more information, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com. Thank you.